You got,
Okay, that's better.
okay, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, you have no idea what I'm talking about. So yes, you should be seeing the forms on the screen, and we are going through the forms on the screen. You can have a copy with you, but you know, it's easier if you do it on the screen and just follow through. Okay, so let's go back to the fair housing. So that's the issue, is when people write these love letters. You can write, there's nothing that says the buyer can write a love letter. In the listing agreement, it basically says, will the seller accept love letters or not? But from the buyer side, they're open to write it. If they're going to write one, just guide them to say, you know, talk about the property, talk about the, you know, landscaping, talk about the layout, talk about the decorations. Don't talk about anything else. Don't talk about how close it is to their church. Don't talk about how close it is, you know, I could walk to school. You know, those are things that give away your one of the protected classes. Also, please no photos. You know, I've seen photos where, you know, people are in full military uniform and the guy goes, oh my God, you know, he's a veteran, I'm a veteran, I'd love to sell him this house. That becomes an issue. So love letters that are generic, just saying how much I love the house, how much I love you done with it, things like that, perfectly fine. Love letters that talk about specific classes, not fine. Okay, possible representation of more than one buyer. So this becomes a question, is what does this mean? What does this truly mean? So this truly means like multiple buyers. You could represent more than one buyer for this property. Century 21 Everest could represent more than one buyer for this property. So you're just letting the seller know that potentially, you know, we could be representing more than one buyer. Our company could be representing more than one buyer. It's just letting them know that's the possibility. Multiple sellers, same thing. We could have multiple listings on the same street. You know, it's just giving it, you know, it's everything, every advisor we have is because someone has got sued for something. So this is probably one that got sued for saying, hey, you didn't tell me you had a listing down the street that you're going to show that listing instead of my listing. We have to treat everything equally. And, you know, if a buyer wants to see both listings, that's great. If they only want to see one listing, that's fine also. But we're just letting everyone know that's the potential. And again, dual agency comes into play again. This is the one that's interested, is offers are not necessarily confidential. You'd be surprised, especially in today's market, how many times, you know, when I have a listing or someone has a listing, we get agents who call us saying, hey, how many offers do you have? Can you tell me what they are? Some agents are going to say, nope, nope, can't do that. Well, actually, they can do that unless the seller specifically in writing says, please do not share this information with anyone else. So you're actually doing your seller a disservice. If I have 5 offers and someone asks me, I'm going to tell you I have 5 offers. So now they know there be, you know, contention against other offers. If you have no offers, that's not great, but at least then they know they're the only offer. Also, what is the offer? You know, do I have above asking? Do I have below asking? The more the other side knows, the better they're going to write their offer. So if you know you have 5 offers and 2 of them are over asking, someone's not going to write a low ball offer and hopefully they're going to get a counter offer. You know, so you're doing your, God, you're doing your seller a disservice by not disclosing the information. Wire fraud advisory. We all know there's a lot of wire fraud going on. The only thing we advise our clients is if they ever get any request to do a wire fund transfer, that they call the escrow number in the contract to confirm that it's a legitimate offer. Otherwise, you know, it could be an email that looks exactly like ours. The phone number is not ours. They call, they go, oh, yeah, fine. Money's gone. I mean, it's scary how, you know, professional these people are, that it actually looks like it's coming from escrow companies. Now we get into the meat of this class, the new California Purchase Agreement. So first one is date prepared. This has nothing to do with the contract. It has nothing to do with timelines, has nothing to do with escrow. The only thing this does is this identifies when this contract was created. So when we do a counteroffer or doing any addendums and stuff like that, we'll say, purchase agreement dated. That's this date here. That's all it is. So it's a date that you started it. It just identifies the contract. This is an offer from, and we can have 4 buyers. I mean, if we have anything more than 2, we're going to need an additional signer, but you could have 4 buyers listed on the contract. The way you get this is you tap on the tab and you will see all 4 buyers here. Property is, wherever it is, what city, state, zip code, parcel numbers. We now can put in multiple parcel numbers because of new required laws and things like that, where people could subdivide their land. We can now do multiple parcel numbers. So if you're selling more than 1 parcel, please put all the parcel numbers here correctly. This is the confirmation. This is who is representing who. If you do the check boxes, you're saying I'm the seller. It knows both the seller and the brokerage firm, buyer, brokerage firm. If you say both, it's smart enough to go through all the things. So what does dual agency mean? Dual agency is if you represent both sides, or if anyone in Century 21 Everest represents both sides. The agency is defined by the broker. So anything that Charlene Simone is the broker of is a dual agent. Century 21 Hilltop, Century 21 anything else is not a dual agency. Century 21 Everest is. Different offices, same office, doesn't make a difference. You are a dual agent. When we came up with this, we knew that now that everything's in the first 3 pages, people are probably not going to read all 16 pages. So we want to make sure, and we do this multiple times, this form is 16 pages. The parties are advised to read all 16 pages. So now we get into what's called the grid. So the grid is basically everything that's negotiable in the contract is here. So the first thing that's negotiable is purchase price. Is it, and it's just a straight dollar amount now, or is it all cash? Now, the thing about the grid also is if you want information about what this is, you can go to this paragraph in the contract and it will explain, what is an all cash offer? What is purchase price? So if you ever have questions, this is where you would go to find out. When we first saw this, it was supposed to be you can click here and it'll go. They haven't got that working yet. Close of escrow. How many days after acceptance or on a specific date? Again, how many days? So, and after acceptance is after the last signature that you have an executed contract. Expiration of offer, 3 calendar days after all buyers' signatures or a specific date. So, if the MLS says, not going to review offers till, next Monday, then I would not have the contract expire. I would, put in whatever date is next Monday. And this way, at least the contract is still active. What happens if the contract expires? If they do a counteroffer and you guys accept, it sort of initiates the clock again and the offer is considered valid. Initial deposit amount. So let's say, let's make life easier. We're going to put in $100,000 or $1 million for a purchase price, which is the average price of a home today. And let's say I want to say, okay, I want to put in $10,000. Okay, it's going to calculate the percentage for you. You cannot put a percent and get the dollar amount. You could do the dollar amount, get a percent. So this way, when someone's reviewing documents, they can look, oh, 1% of the purchase price. We all used to do it before where we, do the calculation. Now it's done for you. And then again, within how many business days after acceptance by wire transfer. We don't have check, cashier's check, money order. We don't have any of those things anymore. Now it's by wire transfer. If you do an other, and then we'll go to 5A and I'll show you that, it'll say, if escrow only accepts wire transfer, then it will be a wire transfer. They have the right to say, no, sorry, we don't take a check. We don't take Bitcoin yet. We don't do money orders. Okay, increased deposit. So an increased deposit is when I've seen increased deposits used a few times. One time is, let's say I have a 401k plan. I can't get my money out right away, but I want to make an offer. So I'll put down X amount of dollars here. And then once my 401k plan is available to get the money out, I'll increase my deposit, fill in this, I'll do this here saying, once this is done, I'll be able to increase my deposit. And it's either removal contingencies or a specific date or a specific item. Let's say, close escrow on my house that I'm selling. So there's different reasons to get an increased deposit. Another reason is, if there's a tenant in the property and you can't see the property, we're going to do basically a blind offer. And I say, I'll increase my deposit once I, inspect the property. And then, I'll increase it by, another $10,000. So I have to click this box here. So now it knows I increased it by another $10,000. Okay. Loan amounts. So this is one of the ones that the default has changed and most people never even noticed it. So loan amounts, what is my first loan? Again, everything is going to be calculated. So 90% loan. What type of loan? Is it FHA or VA? Is it seller financing or something else? If it's conventional, just leave it alone. But the thing that did change is in the other previous RPA, you had buyer to pay, and then you had X amount, blank line for points, just like you have for interest amount. Now it's buyer to pay 0 points. So if the lender says, you know what, you got to pay 1 point, the buyer technically has an out because the contract says buyer to pay 0 points. Do you counter this? That's a decision. I mean, I haven't seen too many issues where people are paying points yet, but when it does come up, you may want to counter and say, buyer to pay a maximum of 2 points or 1 point, just so they don't have an automatic out right away.
Fred?
Now, yes, question.
I don't understand the points. Like points for what? How do they get a point?
Okay, so some lenders, depending on the loan you're taking, they can charge points. So points is usually a percentage of the loan, like 1%. Each point is 1%. So if you're trying to buy down your rates, you could put a point. If you have a I don't want to say terrible credit, but you have questionable credit, the lender may charge you a point to do the loan. So there's different reasons why you would have points. Points used to be real popular years ago. I haven't seen too many loans with points right now. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, like you said, when we get an offer and it has points, do we like that or no?
Well, I don't know if the offer is going to say it has points.
Okay.
Because most offers most pre-approval letters are just going to say the interest rate, things like that. It's not going to go into that much detail.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
like I say, it's just a little thing that has changed. I don't know how much it's going to affect anything, but it's something that has changed.
Okay. Thank you.
From the way it used to be. Now, the other thing that has changed now is FHA or VA. So if you ever done an FHA or VA loan, the appraiser is going to come out and the appraiser is going to do his appraisal, and it's going to be, something called call outs. So the appraiser is going to say, hey, the water heater is not strapped. Hey, there's chipped paint over here. And this is more for FHA and VA, or there's a broken window. So all these things need to be repaired before you can continue with your FHA loan. So right now, you used to just put it as a request for repairs and you just used to lump them all together. When we talk about the request for repairs, there's actually a specific section for FHA and VA issues that the lender needs to fix before the loan will close. And what we're doing is it's now a 17-day acceptance. So you have 17 days to get that request for repairs in if you have FHA or VA issues. 17 days is going to be a big number. Everything is now 17 days. So it's a lot easier. It's not 1721, it is 17 days. So that's the issue with FHA and VA loans. Additional financing, if you have a second, might be coming up again, who knows? Market's always changing, but if you had a second loan, you would put it here and all that information. Occupancy type, now primary is a default. If you check, it's secondary or an investment, and this basically is more for the lender because there are different, requirements for secondary investment in terms of how much down and interest rates and all that. We are not the police. If they're telling me they're going to live in the property, I have no reason to believe they're not going to live in the property. So I'm going whatever they're representing.
Hey, Fred, just a quick question. I'm sorry, on
Sure.
the one right
No,
above,
please.
that FHA VA checked. So,
Yes.
and then the 17 days.
Yes.
So the 17 days is referring directly to that FHA VA comment on the left and not anything else.
Correct. And there was a confusing part. They should have had a box here.
Yeah.
But yeah, this 17 days is just for this FHA VA list of lender required repairs.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah. And when we were doing the training and all that, that came up a lot. There should have been a little box to make it a little more clearer, but maybe the next version will have it.
Yeah.
And Fred, can that be shortened from 17 days or not?
Yes, you could do whatever you like.
All right.
But again, you got to remember, you're writing the offer as this is coming from you as the purchaser. So you may want to shorten it to show that you're more serious. But remember, you're going to have to do your inspection, your appraisal in that whatever timeline you have, because then you have to submit your request for repairs. So you want to shorten it to be a better offer, but you don't want to shorten it, at the expense of your buyer. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay, seller credit to buyer and repair. The purpose of the grid is to try to get the real estate agents out of writing all these fancy terms and conditions and all that. So we used to write, seller to credit buyer, 3% for closing and for closing costs and non-recurrent and recurrent. Got out of that. It's basically a dollar amount. Let's say I want $3,000. Again, it's going to come up with the percentage. And the default is seller credit to be applied to closing costs. If you are doing a loan, this is the only thing the lender will allow you to do. If it's a cash deal, you can credit anything you like. A loan, seller's only going to allow it for closing costs. So verification of all cash. So this is something else that changed, the default. The
Hang on.
default, yes, okay.
Sorry, I have just really quick go back to that seller credit buyer. So you
Yes.
have to know that prior, like before, like writing the offer, you already have to know that ahead of time. I thought you get that amount once you do your inspection.
Okay, so there's two types of credits, Kara. The
Mhm.
first credit is I'm a, could be FHA, VA, or regular buyer. I don't have enough money for all the down payment and closing costs, so I need some help. So I know this up front. Okay. Now, after I do my inspections, I find out, oh, wait a minute, there's a lot of work to be done. I would like another credit. Okay. So yes, that credit is once you do your inspections. This credit is I need help with the closing costs.
Got it. Okay. Thank
Okay. And
you.
I know that up front right away.
Got it.
And it's typically for FHA, you're going to see like 3%. VA also, well, VA is a little bit different, but FHA 3%. Conventional, I don't see that this much here, but that's what this part is helping me pay my closing cost before I even know anything about the property. Okay, so verification of cash, down payment, and loan application used to be 3 days, or if you check the box, attached. Now everything is attached unless you check the box, then it's 3 days. So again, that's just a little default that's changed, just be aware of.
Hey, Fred,
Yes,
Can I bring something up going back one line to
Sure.
G1?
no problem.
Or I should say G2.
Oh,
In the
additional
addition,
financing? Yes.
yeah, I had a deal close where the buyer credited $25,000 to the seller. And that's where you would put that in, correct? If it's a buyer credit to seller. And there was reasons for that. It was tax reasons. Bottom line was the same. But I had a bunch of appraisers call me and say, is this a typo? I'm like, no.
Yeah, I mean, it's unusual, but I mean, some people who want to get the deals done. You do that also, other reasons. But yes, that was where you would put that there if the buyer is crediting the seller.
Thank you.
So, and again, the lender has to approve on that. So, it needs to be in the contract someplace.
Correct. Yes.
Now, verification of loan application. So we never used to have this box, but now we have, what type of approval is it? Is it pre-qualification? Is it a pre-approval? Or is it this new thing called fully underwritten pre-approval? So everyone knows what a pre-qualification is, pre-approval is before. This fully underwritten pre-approval is a new thing that lenders are doing where they're actually running everything, running your credit, getting the underwriter. I'm going through that right now. It's probably a week process. They'll run your credit report. They'll ask you questions about certain things. They'll have you ask, do a lot of things. So it is above a pre-approval type of thing. I know Inspiro does this. I forgot what the name is, Everest Advantage or something like that. But that's what a fully underwritten pre-approval is. So supposedly if you have this, the seller or the buyer is golden. So the only issue is the property. Is the property going to appraise? There are issues with the property. But in terms of the seller, everything should be done and everything should be fine.
That sounds like it's getting very close to contingency removal.
No, because yes, in the terms that if everything's totally fine, you should be able to remove your contingencies. But again, we'll talk about reasons why people don't get loans that are not part of this process. And we've had a few issues with that. Final verification of condition, 5 days prior to close of escrow. Please do this. This is very important. We've had a lot of issues where clients did not do this and we've had issues come up. So final verification of condition is basically you are going through the property, making sure everything is in the same condition when you bought it, plus any repairs that were done or agreed to be done are done. That's all you're looking for. So we had a case where, they didn't do their final verification of property. They come there and there's a lemon tree that's missing from the backyard. One of the relatives took the lemon tree because it was a gift that they gave a long time ago. We are now going back and forth on who's going to pay for that lemon tree. So if you do it 5 days before close of escrow, you have some recourse. It's prior to you guys signing loan docs, prior to funding. So you could say, hey, wait a minute, if this is not fixed, I'm not going to sign loan docs. We're going to hold stuff up. After, you have no recourse at all. After it becomes a civil matter. Once escrow closes and you find something, it becomes a civil issue and it's a whole can of worms. So please, please do this. Also, during your 5 days, if there's a tenant in the property and the tenant was supposed to move out, please make sure they moved out. Don't assume they're going to move out. Don't say, oh, okay, yeah, you got a few more days. No. I've had cases where tenants have stayed and now the new buyer is a landlord. So it's very important to make sure that the property is exactly as you expect it to be delivered. Assignment requests. This has also been a big issue that's been coming up. So there are multiple types of assignment requests. The one that we're going to talk about is when I'm a buyer, I'm going through the process, and then all of a sudden the lender goes, you know what? We're just not there on the DTI or something like that. Can you add someone else to your loan? So now I'm assigning part of this house to this other person. If you do it in the first 17 days, we have time to do everything that needs to be done. After the 17 days, it becomes dicey. And what does that mean? So to do an assignment, we have to do a few things. One, they have to sign all the documents that have already been signed by the original buyer. Two, and this is the big one, escrow has to do their due diligence. So they need to do an SI on the person. And we've had times where the SI comes back and says, wait a minute, this person has child support, this person is this, and now we have an issue with closing. Also, there's a timeline when you do an SI. So escrow's not closing on time, everyone's blaming escrow. Unfortunately, it's not escrow's fault because I've had one buyer added like 3 days before it's supposed to close. There's no way it's going to close on time. So if your buyer knows or your lender knows they need to add another buyer, do it up front. It's a lot easier than doing it after you have an accepted offer. Okay, so here we go back to loans. So this is loan contingency, 17 days. Or if you check this, no loan contingency. Appraisal, 17 days, or if you check this, no appraisal. These are the only two contingencies you can remove from the RPA. Anything else, you're going to need to have a contingency removal attached. So let's talk about this. So let's say I remove my loan contingency. That means that I'm buying this property whether I get a loan or not. So this is a very tough one to remove. It's always against broker advice. Things can happen. Appraisal is another one that people have been using it incorrectly. They think, okay, I removed my appraisal contingency, but now if I can't get my loan because it doesn't appraise, I still have my loan contingency. It is not. And we'll go back to section 8B and it'll explain to you, if you remove your appraisal contingency and you cannot get a loan based solely on the appraisal, then you have no contingency and your earnest money deposit may be at risk. So be very careful when you're removing either of these. Now, this is where we also took some, real estate agents became lawyers and figured out how to do things. So this is what I call bridging the gap of your appraisal. Let's say in the past you would say, buyer to bridge the gap of $20,000 between purchase price and appraised value. And I'll give you an example of how that got someone in trouble. So what we're doing here is we're just going to check this dollar amount box and say, now, our offer was for $1 million. So I'm saying I will go up to 900. Let's see what that, okay. So I'm willing to bridge the gap, $20,000. So if the property appraises between 980 and $1 million, I'm buying this property. Okay, so agents used to write, buyer agrees to bridge the gap, $20,000 between purchase price and appraised value. Seller agrees to it. We had now one loan that came in and the appraised was under $30,000. Is the seller required to sell the property? Because he agreed that, the buyer's going to pay $20,000 over appraised value. So, they bought the offer was at $4,500. Appraisal waiver was $480 to $500. Came in at $470. So what happens now? I don't know. It's the negotiations. Buyer saying, nope, the seller agreed to sell it to me for $20,000, above the appraised value. So if it came in at $470, I'm going to pay $490, but you still got to sell it to me. We don't know what's happening right now. So that's why real estate agents should not practice law. We don't get it right 100% of the time. So you really got to be very careful when you write things in contract to understand what you are writing. So we took this away from you guys and just said, hey, you're going to bridge this. This happened a lot last year. This is how we're going to do it. Any questions on this part?
Do you have to put something there?
No, you don't have to. If you don't put anything there, that means you're not bridging the gap. And if the appraiser doesn't come in, even $1 below, you could say, hey, lower your price or I'm done.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, this is just because in the past, people were going crazy trying to get properties, and this market is still hot.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
people were, coming up with, I'll pay 30,000, 40,000, whatever it is. Now it's documented.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so investigation of property. So this is a question here. What, and I want some responses. What is your investigation of property consist of?
Into homeowners insurance.
Boy, Carol, you've been to too many of my classes. Okay, so yes, investigation of property is all your normal investigations, but it also includes the insurability and affordability of the property. We had one deal where they were in a very high fire zone. The insurance company, when they did their initial question and said, yeah, we can insure you. They removed all the contingencies. Now, when it comes down, the cost was so substantial that now they don't qualify for the loan because of the debt to income ratio. Now, unfortunately, and again, we'll go back to paragraph 8C, if you don't qualify for the loan because you can't afford or can't obtain insurance, that's not a loan contingency. It is inspection contingency. So be very careful when you are removing your inspection contingency. And you're going to have to check this box, and we're going to go over the contingency removal, because there is a way to remove your inspection contingency, but to keep your homeowner's insurance contingency still in place. Okay, so this is very important, especially in the very high fire zones, especially the way insurance companies are now canceling and increasing costs. It is an important contingency to remember you have. Now, even if I remove my inspection contingency, I still have what's called informational access to the property. I, as a buyer, should still do all my investigations. I want to know what I am buying, so I have a total understanding. If I remove my inspection contingency, I cannot use this as a reason to get out of the deal, but at least now I know everything that I'm getting into. And as an agent, you should always recommend that your buyers still do all their investigations, even if they remove their contingency, because they may find things that they weren't aware of, but at least now they're aware of and they can prepare for it once they close the deal. So it's very important that the two are separated. One is your contingency for what you find. One is I'm still going to do all my investigations and do everything I need to do so I know the condition of the property I'm buying. Does everyone understand the difference there? All right. Okay, review of seller documents. So this is, they turn over the documents to us, and now we have 17 days after acceptance, not 17 days when they turn over the documents, but 17 days after acceptance, or if they turn it over late, I have 5 days after I receive it. Okay, so let's say they turned it to me on the 16th day, I now have 5 days. If they turn it to me on the 10th day, I'm within this 17 days. So that is why it's also very important that you make sure your sellers give you the documents in a timely manner. And we're going to talk about that timeline down below. Okay, so it's very important that they do that. Title report, 17 days after acceptance to review it, or 5 days, whichever is less. Common interest disclosures, HOAs. Review of leased or liened items, 17 days or 5 days. So this is all stuff that you as the buyer, your buyer, needs to review to make sure they're doing everything right. Here's another one that now is a little different. And we used to write this in, sale, purchase agreement is contingent on sale of, buyer's property. No longer. You need to check this box and you need to fill out what's called a COP form. Okay. So this is going to say, okay, my home, and we're going to go over the COP. I cannot buy this home until I sell my home and close escrow. And there's different levels, and we'll talk about when timelines start, but this is a very important document to protect your buyer if they need to sell their property. Okay, this is another thing that changed. Time of possession used to be 6 PM on close of escrow. It is now whenever I got notice, I recorded. So you got, if you're not, if they get notice at 2 PM, they can say, hey, I want my keys at 2 PM. If your buyers, if your sellers need the full time to get out that day, then make sure you counter saying 6 PM. Okay, if you don't counter, they can get the keys whenever you record. So this is another switch that if you're not aware of, could hurt you and bite you. Okay, seller occupied of vacant units. So let's say the seller needs to stay anything past day 0. Okay, so they need to stay 1 day after escrow, 2 days after escrow, whatever it is. If it's less than 29, we are giving them a lease or we are giving them a license to stay there. If it's after 30 days, they now become a tenant. And there's a big difference between a license and a tenant. The SIP is 2 pages. The LAS is 7 pages plus all the disclosures, bed bug and everything else. So if you can do less than 29 days, that is preferred. If you got to go to 30, this is where it also gets tricky. If it's a loan, the lender's not going to let you stay more than 59 days. So again, look at your timelines, look at all the things, work with your lender. My preference is 29 or less. My preference is actually 0, but 29 or less is a lot easier than 30 or more. But again, this needs to be here and you need to fill out the form. This is another one that has now changed, is tenant occupied units. In the old RPA, it was, if it was a tenant occupied unit, they had 5 days to vacate and then they're gone. Not any longer. Now that you got to fill out called the TOPA, tenant occupied property addendum. And it's very important you fill it out correctly because the default is the tenant stays. And we'll go over the TOPA. So if you don't do anything, the tenant is staying in the property and your buyer is now becoming a landlord. So you got to make sure you check this box, fill it out correctly, go back to do your verification of property 5 days before, make sure they're gone. Otherwise, in today's environment, tenants have a lot of rights and it makes it really difficult to get rid of them. And your buyer may be inheriting something that they did not mean to inherit. Seller delivery of a document. So this goes back to, I have 13 days, 17 days to review it. They have 7 days to give it to me. So that means, in theory, I only have 10 days to review the documents if everyone goes right. So if they don't give it to you on 7 days, you should be calling the other agent, you know what? My 17 days is coming up. I need these documents. What's the problem? What's the issue? Try to work it out. Try to get those documents as quickly as possible. Sign and return escrow holder provisions and instructions, 5 days. This is very important. Whether you are representing a seller or a buyer, make sure they get their documents into escrow as quickly as possible, because the biggest document that's going to be an issue is the statement of information. We had one deal where they were ready to close escrow, statement of information came back. Guess what? They technically had back child support. We don't know if it was paid off or not. Everything was closed around the holidays. It took us a long time to get confirmation, but if they would have done it in the beginning in 5 days, we would have known way before escrow was ready to close. Okay, so this is also very important for you as an agent to work with your clients, whether buyer or seller, and say, hey, have you returned all your escrow documents? Did you have any questions? If you use All Valley Escrow, they will send someone as a notary out there to help you do your escrow documents and notarize it at the same time. No cost to you. So please take advantage of all these things. But this is very important. Timelines are very important. Time to pay fees for ordering HOA documents, 3 days. HOA documents take a long time to get. If you wait too long, then you have to pay special delivery fees, which is, almost twice as much as the documents itself. So make sure when you take a listing, you actually should be ordering your HOA docs as quickly as possible, because it's going to have to happen. You might as well do it now. Install smoke alarms detectors, 7 days. Not saying who pays for it, not saying who does it. It's 7 days. And the reason it's 7 days is because if your appraiser comes out and they find out your smoke detector, CO2, or water heater has an issue, they're more than willing to come back again and charge you X amount of dollars to do another or another appraisal. So you want to get this done before the appraiser comes out. Evidence of representative capacity 3 days after acceptance. So if the seller is a trust, if the buyer is a LLC, whatever the condition is, within 3 days, we have to show escrow why John Smith can sign for this company or this trust. So you have to show evidence of acceptance, whether it be buyer or seller, either side. Okay, this is my new favorite. This is now, in the prior contract, there was refrigerator, washer, dryer, stove. All you had to do is remember 3 things. Now you have this whole paragraph here of what stays and what goes. I'm recommending when you are showing properties, you take a snapshot of this, and for every property, fill this out. Because believe it or not, your buyer's going to call you and go, hey, you remember that property we saw last week? Is it still available? Yeah, great. I'd like to write an offer on it. You're not going to remember which one of these things was there. You can remember a stove, you can remember a refrigerator, you can remember washer and dryer, but you're not going to remember, did it have a video doorbell? Did it have any smart home devices? Did it have a wine refrigerator? Did it have, electric car charging system? Are there any potted trees or shrubs that you really want? So this is a more detailed list of what is staying. You check it, it better be there. And if it's not there, the seller better, counter it. If you don't check it, it may not be staying. So, if you move in and there's no stove, you didn't check stove, you know what? It's going to be an issue. Someone's going to be buying a stove. So this is very important these days now. And you may be laughing why bathroom mirrors is automatically checked, because I've had a deal where buyer came in, loved the bathrooms, everything was fine, closes escrow, comes in, guess what? There's no mirrors. The mirrors were just picture frames, and they were allowed to take them. So someone was buying new mirrors for the bathrooms. So be very careful of what's included in the property, both as the buyer side and from the seller side. I mean, if you put video doorbells and you accept that offer and there's no video doorbell, the seller or seller's agent may be buying a video doorbell. So it's very important you check it correctly, and when you get as an offer, you review it correctly.
Hey,
Any
Fred,
questions? Yes.
yeah, does this style change create problems with e-signaturing? And maybe this would be a good question for Yvette, because this is her world.
When you say that, what does that mean?
Well, lots of checkboxes. This kind of reminds me of TDS SBQ, which is a real pain in the butt for
Right.
e-signature type documents.
Well, okay. So the difference is the TDS and SBQ needs to be filled out by the person signing it.
Correct.
This needs to be filled out ahead of time by the agent before your buyer signs the offer.
Okay.
So this should be filled out in zip forms as opposed to the TDS or SBQ, which is filled out after it's sent out for signatures.
Okay. I mean, I could see a buyer wanting to fill this out.
They may, but I mean, they could say, hey, wait a minute. I remember there was a video doorbell there and you didn't check it. At that point, you're probably going to have to redo this and send it again. I don't think it allows the buyer to check boxes once it's out for signature.
Okay.
And Yvette, I mean, if you had experience or, now that we're doing this, you might know
Yeah, I mean, this is what we fill out, or as agents you would fill out. Like I did write one for a buyer right after this came out, and I had First American as the home warranty company, and she had called and said, hey, I actually want to pay for my own home warranty, and I want to use American Home Shield. So I just revised the page and then changed out the document to have the right stuff. So buyers aren't, this is your legal documents, your license. Your buyer shouldn't be filling out their own contract.
Okay, yeah, good
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, so then that's a difference because the TDS and SPQ is designed to be filled out by the, seller. So that's why that option's there. But yeah, this is going to be, I can see a lot of issues coming up with this. Something's missed, something's checked that's not there. I'm just waiting for all the fun to start.
I would think that if either okay, so you don't have the snapshot as you suggest, Fred, when you're showing property, we know how it is. I would think that if there was a question between you and the buyer when you're filling this section out, you could go ahead and just check it whether or not that item may be there and let the seller counter it, just to cover your tail. Because if you we know how it is, like you said, when you're out there showing a lot of homes, you don't remember, certain homes, and a lot of this will be in the MLS.
Okay, but the MLS is an advertisement. So
Correct.
yes, you can look in the MLS, and if it says this, then you could check it. And I from the buyer side, like you're saying, it's better to check stuff to protect yourself, but then that makes sure the seller, and when you're on the seller side, you really look at this, and if they're checking something that's not there, make sure you counter it out.
Exactly.
So it just adds a little bit more from both the buyer and the seller side to be more diligent of the contract. So like, I've had many deals where, they checked washer and dryer, no one counted out, and there was no washer and dryer. So now the issue is who's buying a washer and dryer? So I could see that, like I said, when there was 3 things to check, it was easy to remember, refrigerator, washer, dryer, and stove. Oh, okay, great. But now it's a multitude of things. So it's really, for the buyer side, make sure you got definitely, like if you don't check something and it's there and the buyer really wanted it, that's an issue. And from the seller side, if something's checked and it's not there, or if the seller says, no, I'm really taking this, make sure you counter it. So from both sides, this is going to be an interesting section.
Agreed.
All right, NHD. Our NHD provider is My Seller's Choice. And again, it's the buyer, the seller, or both. And we like environmental. So I've got to make sure I update the template to include environmental. So, and the NHD report should be ordered as quickly as possible for a few reasons. One, it identifies very high fire zones for insurance and also flood zones. But 2, it also gives you if there's any Mello-Roos, any taxes, any assessments, things like that. So, no matter when you sell the property, you're going to have an NHD. You might as well do it up front the minute you take your listing. These are any other reports that you'd like. I'd like a termite report. Who's going to pay for it, buyer or seller? Now, if the buyer is paying for these reports, I would not put it in this contract. I've seen too many people say, home inspection report paid by buyer. Now this becomes part of the contract. The lender can ask for a copy of it. And now it becomes an issue if they find something that you're not asking to be repaired. If the buyer is paying for it, try not to put it in the contract. It's not, lender fraud. We're not hiding anything. We're just not making part of the contract. If the seller's paying for it, make sure it's in the contract.
Fred,
Yes.
I have a question. I don't know if this is the right area to be asking the question, but I remember the last time you did your presentation, you said, don't check as is, because then the whole room said, I'm not going to show places that have as is, because technically you have to, disclose all of your disclosures anyway, right? But I guess my question is, if you, okay, so when it comes to the inspection part, or is the seller always, they don't have to pay the price, like when they come up with the price, you don't have to respond to it, but you always have to pay section 1?
Okay, so
Okay.
again, it depends. For
Okay.
FHA and FHA loans, section 1 is required,
Right,
cleared. The lender's gonna want a section 1 clearance.
okay,
For VA, it's section 1 and section 2.
okay,
Okay, conventional, now, there's no requirement.
so they
Okay.
they don't have to respond to any credits, they don't have to respond to section 1, they have that choice of, that's
Right.
where it would be as is,
Well,
or?
okay, my thing with as is if you put as is in the MLS, that means there's a lot of problems with this house that you're trying to hide.
Right,
Okay. The seller never has to respond to any repair. I mean, they even if an FHA loan and they say section 1, you can say, sorry, I'm not gonna pay for it.
mhm,
But you have to understand, and the request for repairs now states that if you're not gonna pay for it, these people may not be able to get the loan.
right.
So you're potentially saying, I'm gonna do another deal with someone else.
Okay.
So, yeah, but I'm just saying, FHA, section 1 is only required for FHA and VA, section 2 for VA. So if I put this in here, inspection report, and I'm buying it, the buyer's paying for it, then the lender could ask for it. And then the lender could say, oh my God, there's so much termite damage. Yeah, we definitely want this fixed. But
Mm,
as a overall condition, it's typically not required for section 1, unless the lender calls it out and says, oh my God, look at this report, there was so much out there.
okay,
Okay. So that is why, unless the seller's paying for it, I usually try to keep it out of the RPA.
okay,
Okay. So now who's paying for smoke alarms, carbon monoxide and water? Is it the buyer? Is it the seller, or is it both? Government required point of sale inspections. This is more for LA City. I know Ventura has a sewer lateral inspection, so who's going to pay for that? And then again, LA City, not just the report, but you also got to take corrective actions with the report. So if you have to, install smoke detectors, if you have to install a gas shutoff valve, who's going to pay for that? Escrow fees, they finally got smart, each to pay their own fees. I've seen this new contract and people are checking this and they're typing, each to pay their own. There's a box now for that. So I don't know why they're doing that. And who is the escrow holder? And, All Valley Escrow or seller to choose, whatever scenario. Title policy, buyer, seller, or both. And what company are you going to use? So typically, escrow fees is each to pay their own. Title policy is seller and whatever escrow company you want to use. Buyer's lender policy is the buyer's paying for it. That's not an issue. County transfer fees, every county has one. Who's paying for it? City transfer fee, not every city has one. LA City, I know, has one. And who's going to pay for that? If you put one here and there is no fee that exists, it's, you're just protecting yourself. HOA fee for docs, the seller's definitely paying for that. HOA certification fee, the buyer's paying for that. HOA transfer fees, who's going to pay for it? Typically seller. In most cases, depends again. If you really want the deal, you go, hey, I'll buy it as the buyer, I'll pay for it. Private transfer fees, again, is it the seller is the default. If you want to change it and you say, you know what, I'll pay for it or both, you can do it here. Any other fees or costs, who's paying for it? Now we have a change with the home warranties. We just have the plan. So it's a CREST plan and the buyer to select options. We've had too many issues where, we selected the options and we forgot to add pool. And now all of a sudden they call the home warranty, the pool's broken. Oh, sorry, you don't have that coverage. So we take us out of the equation and the buyer is to select the options. So whoever's ordering the home warranty would be calling the buyer or the buyer's agent and say, hey, what options do you want? If they pick more options and the cost is over whatever we're willing to pay for, then they owe the difference. And again, who's going to pay for it? Buyer, seller. And if the buyer waives the home warranty plan, they waive it here. Okay? So that's the grid. That's everything that's negotiable. So when you were writing an offer, this is all the important stuff. When you're reviewing an offer, this is all the important stuff. Now we get to the meat of the stuff behind the grid. Okay, so there is no more probate purchase agreement. There is no more manufactured home purchase agreement. These are now addendums that are added to the RPA. So if you're doing a probate or a manufactured home, you just fill out the form correctly, and then you're going to add an addendum with the manufactured home that's going to ask for serial numbers and things like that. Tenant occupied property addendum, going to go over. Tenancy in common purchase addendum. We don't have too many of those deals, and we don't have too many stock cooperative purchase addendums yet. What other addendums are included?
Hey,
You know,
Fred, real quick,
Yeah, sure.
sorry.
No.
Now with, it's more the sections above. Now, do you have a template that C21 Everest recommends that's available for us to tap into?
Well, actually, if you're using the C21 broker edition,
Uh-huh.
the template's already there. So when
Yeah.
you load it up, the default, whatever we think should be there is there. You can add your own template above with your own private information, and that will overlay our template. But, you know, so like this comes from our template, Crest, buy to select options, you know, and the cost, I
Perfect.
don't have a cost in there
Right.
because that's something you need to put in there. I also don't put in who's paying for what because that's all negotiable.
No, I got it. Yeah.
So, but yeah,
Okay,
it's
good.
like,
So there is a template out there for us to take advantage of.
yes, yeah, like the one that, like here, you know, I put in my seller's choice. I'm not saying who's paying for it. I got to check environmental and update my template. So it's going to be a lot of the generic things are in there. Anything that's specific, like, you know, your name, your BRE number and all that, that could be in your own template, and that will overlay when you do a listing or purchase, you'll have our template, and then your template overlays the information.
No, perfect. The you putting out that template helps us a lot. So thank you for that.
Perfect.
Hold on one second.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so right there, when if
Right
you're
here.
just, yeah, right, a little bit up where it says like the manufactured homes and all that.
Yes.
So if it's just a residential, do you press other or you just don't do any of them?
Don't do anything. This
Don't do
is the
anything.
residential.
This is okay. So this is just
There is no addendum. This is it.
this is it. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
But if you do a probate or you do a manufactured,
You click it.
there'll be another addendum which has specific things for your manufactured home or probate. And also tenant occupied is going to have things. And again, whether the tenants are staying there or not, this needs to be completed.
Okay.
These are the addendums, and we attach a Century 21 Everest addendum to make sure it's part of the contract. So this way, you know, we know who's paying the $395 and all the other things. If you're doing any other ones, just check it and it'll automatically populate, you know, like if you have a septic well, you know, or a short sale, call confirmation, anything like that, it will pop up additional. These are provided by the contract, so these are already included. And this is, again, any advisories. There's been a debate whether to include the statewide buyer and seller advisory. I don't, because that's a 16-page document that I don't think you want to send to every single offer that you write in. Once you have an offer accepted, you can, you know, either the seller or you are going to do it. So I don't have it checked here, but if you'd like to have it with it, you can check it and it'll be part of your, you know, listing or a purchase contract. Okay, so this goes into, like I said, 5, you know, these are now the sections that were identified before. You know, what is initial deposit? What's increased deposit? You know, all cash offer. You know, no loan is needed to purchase the property. This agreement is not contingent on the buyer obtaining a loan. Buyer shall, however, with the time specified, deliver verification that they have closing costs, things like that. So now if, let's say you accepted the offer saying there was an all cash offer, and now they need to take a loan, you don't have the right to cancel it. But again, you don't have the duty to agree to what they're doing. So if they need extensions for anything, you could say, nope, sorry, I accept it as a cash offer. You know, if you're getting a loan, that's now on you. And if you can, you know, buy the property, sorry, you don't have a contingency. So, you know, it's just like we have the same thing too, where people start with a conventional financing and now they switch to FHA. Okay. So do we need to extend the time for disclosures? Do we need to expend time for investigations? No, we still have the contract. They switched what the original contract was. So now if they need extensions, they need to do a request for an extension of time and we don't have to agree to it.
Fred,
Yes.
on 4B, all cash offer, didn't there used to be a box there that it said verification attached?
It is now up in the grid. Verification of all cash offer attached.
Perfect, thank you.
And then you see where it says 5B. And if we go back to 5B, lo and behold, talks about all cash offer. Yeah, so that's what they took out of, there was a lot of places where you could check boxes in the middle of the document. And they took all that out because, you know, there were so many times where someone would check, you know, on the third line, you know, a box that no one would ever catch. And then now that's part of the contract. So they took all that out, put it up front, and this is all basically explanation of what's up there.
Love it, thank you.
And this is what we're talking about, buyer's loan status, buyer authorized seller and seller's authorized to contact the buyer's lender. You know, so we now can talk to the lender to find out the status of the loan. We can't ask any personal information like, you know, oh, what's the guy's income or anything like that. It's basically more information on what's the status of the loan, where we at, what's needed to make this thing happen. Limits of credits to buyer. This is something that, you know, nothing's really changed in all this. This is basically saying, if you have a loan, your credit to the buyer is limited to the amount of closing cost credits. Okay, so if you only have $10,000 in closing costs, then you can only credit up to $10,000. If you agree to $12,000, $2,000 will go in no place. The buyer's not going to get a check. It's all a credit, so they have to bring in less money. If you are over the closing cost limit, work with your lender to find out what that number is, and then work with either reduction of price and a combination credits. So this one's everyone's happy and they still get the same amount of money they're talking about. Verification of loan, down payments, buyer stated financing. So this is where we said, sellers relying on buyer's representation of the type of financing, including and not limited to cash. Seller has agreed to a specific closing date, purchase price, and to sell to buyer in reliance of the financing. Buyer shall pursue the financing agreed. If the buyer does something else, the seller does not need to agree to change the contract. So now if the buyer needs more time because of an appraisal or not time for closing, the seller has no obligation to agree with it. But again, from the seller side, if you don't, you may be losing the deal, but you can't, if someone says cash and now I'm getting an FHA loan, you don't have the automatic right to cancel. You have to go through the contract, and if they can't make a date, do a notice to perform, then you can cancel. Okay, occupancy, buyer intends to occupy the product unless it's stated differently. You know, and this is the as is.
Looking good.
Yes, looks good.
Okay. So I'm on my laptop computer now, so let's get to where we were. Okay, so like we were talking about, buyer stated financing, we don't have to agree. We don't have to do anything when they change the loan, but they need to do extension of times, but we can cancel. So that's the only thing that we need to understand. You know, people say, oh my God, you know, they said it's a cash deal. Now they're doing an FHA loan. I want to cancel. You don't have the right to cancel, but you have the right to manage the contract and the timelines. And if they can't perform, then you can cancel. Okay. So closing and possession. Right now, possession is at the time of recording, unless it's changed. Condition of the property at closing has to be the same as it was before. This is where that as is means really nothing, so we got to go with that. Seller to remain in possession after close of escrow. Like I say, anything after 1 day, they need to fill out a seller in possession. And what a seller in possession does is it goes over, who's paying what insurance, because we've had issues where, we close escrow. Now the seller's policy is done. The buyer's policy takes effect, but the buyer's policy doesn't include stuff in the house from the seller. So if there's a flood or a leak or whatever, and there's stuff destroyed in the house, whose policy is going to cover that? So that's what the seller in possession and the lease all take care of. They go through all that. Okay. This is where we talked about removal of contingencies and what does it mean? If there is no appraisal contingency or the appraisal contingency has been waived or removed, then failure of the property to appraise at the purchase price does not entitle buyer to exercise cancellation due to the loan. So a lot of people, I had an agent when we did this a while ago, and an agent goes, "Oh my God, I never knew that." I always said, hey, you at least have your loan contingency, so we're covered. Loan contingency does not, if you remove appraisal contingency, you don't have it. And if you remove your investigation and you still need to get fire and property insurance and you can't afford it, that's not a contingency for the loan. Like it says, buyers advised to investigate the insurability of property as early as possible, as this may be a requirement for lending. Buyer's ability to obtain insurance for property, including fire insurance, is part of the buyer's investigation. So it's very important when you remove contingencies, you really know what contingency you're removing and what are the effects of that. Buyers are going to say, "Hey, I want to remove all my contingencies." You just need to explain to them, and preferably with an email, so we have a track saying, if you remove this contingency, these are your risks. If you're willing to accept these risks, that we can do this, but I just want to make sure you're aware of what these risks are. Okay, an appraisal contingency. No appraisal contingency means if it doesn't appraise, the buyer either needs to come up with the money or, we have a performance issue and we can go after earnest money deposit. Investigation of property. It's very important that the buyer does their investigations. Even if we removed our contingencies, they should still do an investigations so they understand what their issues are and what the potential downfalls are of this property. They need to review any lease to lien items, solar, solar panels, propane tanks, depends if it was leased to lien. Anything that's leased to lien needs to be discussed, and potentially the buyer has to take over the new solar panel lease. And we've had lots of issues where, either the buyer couldn't perform, couldn't take it over, and that became now an issue, or, the lease was so outrageous that the buyer said, "You know what, at this rate, it's cheaper, not to have the solar panel, so I'm not moving off forward with this deal." Okay. Items included and excluded from sale. Just go with this fact. Everything's included. It makes life a lot easier. I mean, water features, pool cleaners, pool nets, pool covers, garage door openers, remote controls, mailbox, in-ground landscaping, water features, fountains, water softeners, water purifiers, light bulbs, smart bulbs, assume everything is going to stay. If the seller specifically wants something not to stay, they better do it in an offer, not just the MLS. It needs to be in a contract, either a counter offer or an addendum that everyone agrees to. Stuff in the MLS is just an advertisement. If it says, ceiling fan not included, doesn't mean it's not included unless it's in the contract. And this is where it's really, draperies, window coverings, everything's really included right now. So just make sure you are covered. If you're walking through the house with your buyer and your buyer goes, oh my God, that's a beautiful chandelier, make sure you specifically put in the contract, chandelier to stay, because we don't know the history of that chandelier. The seller may decide to take it. But again, if they take it, there's issues with the contract. So it's easier to identify all issues up front rather than when we close it escrow. If when you take your list and the seller's walking through the house and go, oh my God, that's a beautiful chandelier, I'm going to be taking that with me, that was handed down from my grandmother, then you better make sure you have it excluded. And better yet, tell your seller, you know what? Someone's going to fall in love with that chandelier. Why don't we replace it now with something else? So this way, when they see the house, the chandelier is not there and they go, oh my God, I love that chandelier. It's just all about expectations and avoiding problems. Okay, allocation of costs, who's paying for what? We did all that up front. Reinspection fees. If for some reason the appraiser has to come out due to no fault of the buyer, then the seller is, obligated for that reinspection fee. So you got to make sure that everyone understands that. That's why we want to make sure the smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, water heat abrasives, all done within 7 days before the appraiser comes out. When I was practicing real estate, I carry carbon monoxide detectors in my car. And, if I was going for an appraisal and there wasn't one there, I'd plug it in the wall. It's done. Then I charge the seller for it. And, we don't have to have the appraiser come out again. So it's all about understanding the contract, understanding what's going on.
So Fred,
Yes.
I know it's pretty self-explanatory, but all like the first couple pages is the actual offer. And then this, all that we're going through is just explaining each, breaking down where all those numbers and letters are in the
Right.
very beginning.
This
Yeah.
is going over the explanation of why certain things are up front.
Yeah. Okay.
So if someone, says, wait a minute, I'm have a home warranty, but I only want to pay this, you go down here and it explains, if the buyer picks up more than what cost, then the buyer is responsible for the difference.
Right. So you just go right here and just read it to go there. Just
Correct. And that's why it's so important to go over. The grid is the most important part because that's where all the negotiation is. But it's also important to go over this part to highlight certain things to your buyer or to your seller so they understand what's going on.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
Okay. TDS, NHD, and SPQ is required. These are the required documents. So you should be doing your TDS and NHD the minute you get your listing. Home fire hardening, disclosure, and advisory in an defensible space. So this has caused a lot of questions, especially recently. This is only required if, one, a TDS is required. So if you have a trust selling and it's a trust that the people passed away, it's not required. So if a TDS is required, the FHDs, the fire hydrant and dispensable space is required. If it's a high or very high fire zone, and that we're going to find out from the NHD report. So if any of those exist, then it's required also. So if you look at and we'll actually talk about that another day, but it's really a very simple form to fill out. It's just a lot of people have questions about it, and we'll go over the questions when we do it. Okay. Megan's Law. My advice, never look at it. If you have, as a real estate agent, look at Megan's Law, you have to disclose what you know. So do not do that. We've had one case where the agent looked at it, realized that someone on that street was on the registry. So they had to disclose it. The seller didn't even know that someone lived in the neighborhood, but since the agent did, we had to disclose it. So it's better not to know, sometimes, bury your head in the sand on certain things like that. NHD report, known material facts. anything that's a known material fact needs to be disclosed by the seller. Even if the seller says, I'm selling as is and blah, 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 that's great. You still have to do all your disclosures and you have to say anything that is known. Now, in terms of the agent, you know, and you know, when you have your seller and you're talking to them and fill out these forms, remind them, your buyer, your neighbors will talk. You know, your neighbors will tell everything they know about this neighborhood, this house. So it's better if you disclose it now than they find out from the neighbors. And I guarantee you neighbors do talk. So investigations, general home inspection, lead-based paint, wood destroying pests. So these are all inspections the buyer can do at their own cost. And, you know, they have the 17 days where they have access. Even if they remove their contingency, they still have the right to do all these inspections. Title invested. How the people are going to take title, we advise them. That is and even escrow can advise them. Escrow has a sheet that says, these are the ways you can do it, and these implications. You need to, you know, advise them to talk to a CPA or a tax attorney because there are ramifications. If they go, well, what's the most common way? Again, we cannot say anything. They need to get their advice from a tax attorney or a CPA. Time periods. You know, again, these are the definitions of the time periods we talked about up front. When does the seller deliver a document? 7 days. That means they need to get it to you within 7 days. If they don't, you should be talking and saying, hey, wait a minute, I don't have all my disclosures. So my 17 days is still going to be on time, but I need your documents so I can get my buyer to review them. The seller has very few rights to cancel a transaction. Basically, the way the seller cancels a transaction is two ways. One, the buyer was not able to perform one of the functions, either remove a contingency, you know, earnest money deposit, whatever is required. The problem is you just can't cancel. So we had one deal where the earnest money deposit, it was 7 days, wasn't in yet. And the seller goes, you know what, I want to cancel. That's great. We can't cancel until we give them a notice to perform. So you need to make sure you give notice to perform when things are happening. So this way your seller has the option to cancel. Giving a notice to perform doesn't mean we're going to cancel. It's just giving the other side notice saying, hey, we're managing the contract. We're watching the contract. These are the deadlines. What's going on? Or if the seller has a contingency that says they have to sell their house or some other contingency like that, then they have the right to cancel also. Buyer's right to cancel is whatever contingency they still have if they didn't remove any. And then also, you know, if the seller doesn't perform. So if the seller doesn't give you the documents in 7 days and you give a notice to perform and you still don't have it, you can decide whether you want to move on or whether you want to cancel. So again, it's all about notice to perform and expectations and timelines in the contract. Okay, be very careful when you remove contingencies. We're going to go over the contingency removal because certain contingencies, you may not think about it, like investigation. No one really thinks, oh yeah, it includes insurance, but it does. So you need to make sure what you're removing. Demand to close escrow. Either side can give a demand to close escrow. It's a 3-day demand. So, you know, you can give it up to 3 days before the close of escrow, either the buyer or the seller. Unfortunately, if they can't close escrow, then, you know, we need to figure out what we're going to do. You know, do we just cancel? Do we want our money back? How do we proceed? Repairs shall be completed prior to final verification. Again, that's why we do the VP, to make sure repairs are done. Repairs shall be performed by a good, skillful manner with materials and quality and appearance comparable for existing materials. So, you know, depending on the repair, it shouldn't be something like, oh my God, I can't believe that wall was patched. I could see it right now. You know, so certain repairs, you know, you have to look at it. It's not required to be done by a certified contractor or anything like that, unless you put it in your count, you know, your request for repairs, repairs to be done by a certified electrician or a certified contractor. Otherwise, as long as it's done up to code, up to standards, it is fine. Proration of property taxes. This is another one that got us in trouble. When you have a buyer, you need to let your buyer know that they're going to get what's called a supplemental tax bill. They may get one, they may get two. These taxes need to be paid by the buyer, not by escrow, not by the impound account. These are supplemental taxes that is a difference between the purchase price of the property and the value of the property that the tax roll has. And this is the difference. A lot of people get this bill and go, oh, I have an impound account, that's taken care of. Make sure, call your impound, make sure it's taken care of. If it's not, it needs to be paid. Otherwise, you will have a penalty.
Hey, Fred, you mentioned that we've gotten in trouble for that. Can you elaborate?
A buyer got a supplemental tax bill, didn't pay the tax bill, thought it was, taking care of escrow and all that. Then they got a tax penalty, and then they called us and go, well, you never told me I'm going to get a proration. And that's why you need, it is a few different places. It's here, it's in the SBSA, but again, we need to make sure we tag these highlights, because I can guarantee you with electronic signatures, no one reads the SBSA. They just click, 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 signed, we're done. So anything that potentially has got us in problems before, I'm letting you guys know that when you're talking about this, just highlight it. So this way, we discussed it. And because no one's going to read the whole thing. Kara tried to read it, and how far did you get with the RPA?
I got to page 11.
Well, you're almost at the end there. So, but
I had to take breaks though.
yeah, we're assuming the buyers are going to read all this. And, we know the buyers are not going to read all this. We know the sellers are not going to read all this. So the best we could do is, from our past experiences, whether, I send out from the chair saying these things, or from your past experience, anything that that's hit you in the past, make sure you just highlight it. You don't have to go into great details, but just highlight it and say, hey, you know what? When we close escrow, you're going to get two supplement, you're going to get one or two bills for the tax, and you're going to have to pay those. If you'd like to know how much those are, the NHD has a great calculation at the back of the document. They have a website you can go to, the seller or the buyer can go to, not you, and they can put in their information, and we'll tell them, you'll get a tax bill 2 times and this will be the amount. So this way they're just aware of it, because no one, I'm a realist. No one's reading this. No one's going to understand it all. So I'm just highlighting, when I've done deals, I just highlight the stuff that I know has hit me in the past to make sure people know about it.
So how far after they buy the property do they get this? What's the time frame?
It's, the first one's usually like within a month or two.
Okay.
And it basically says supplemental tax bill.
Okay.
It says, supplemental tax bill must be paid, but again,
Right.
If I have an impound account and I'm a buyer, I go, oh, my impound account takes care of that. I don't need to worry about it. But it's not going to be taken care of.
Right.
But
Okay.
sometimes there's some solicitations that make it look like a bill, and it's really confusing to the buyers. This is probably the most asked question I've had.
Yeah.
Sometimes 4 to 5 months after they close. And
Oh,
these
wow.
solicitations are really irritating and confusing to them.
Yep. And then there's also, they'll, most likely get a solicitation about doing what's called the Homestead Act. And that's free. You just you fill out a form and it's done, but they'll get solicitations, I'll charge you $95 to fill out this form for you. And, they're going to be inundated with all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's just like real estate agents. We're inundated with all people trying to sell us stuff.
Yeah, true.
No difference.
True.
Joint escrow instructions. So everyone's going to get their copy of the escrow instructions. The seller gets their copy, the buyer gets their copy, the listing agent and the buyer's agent all get a copy. You should read your escrow instructions, make sure everything's in there, make sure they've captured all the, credits, make sure they've captured all the, counter offers and offers. I mean, I've had some escrow instructions where, the last counter offer was a price increase. They never got it. No one ever caught it, and ready to close escrow, and wait a minute, that's the wrong price. So it's very important that you guys read your escrow instructions. Now, it's also important that the buyer reads their escrow instructions and the seller reads their escrow instructions. So you're also reading it to make sure everything's been covered. Okay. Selection of service, we do not guarantee the performance of any of our vendors. You should never recommend anyone that you have not personally used or had dealings with. People ask, oh, do you have a good electrician? Make sure that you've used them and you have good reviews with them. Don't just look in Yelp or, Angie's List and give them a list and, oh yeah, use this guy, because they will always come back to you. Well, you recommended this guy and he did a lousy job. So you want to make sure you have a good team of people that you work with, because those people represent you out in the field. So if your electrician does a great job, it reflects back on you. If your electrician does a lousy job, it reflects back on you. This is the assignment we talked about. It's always better to assign it up front, but once you have an executed contract, it's a whole different animal. But again, do it as quickly as possible. Any good lender should know when they need to do an assignment. It shouldn't happen 2 days before we're ready to close escrow. Oh, you know what? The buyer's not really that qualified. He needs an assignment. Any good lender should be doing their work up front. As is condition means actually as is. All it does is, you still have to disclose all known material facts and defects. You can't hide anything, but it's just saying, I'm not going to do any repairs, and that's fine. You don't have to do any repairs.
But you're also saying not to mark that though.
Well, I'm saying not to put it in the MLS, because when I was practicing real estate and I'd have a buyer, if I'd see one picture and it, in the big bold letters, sold as is, that's an indication right now that something's wrong.
Right.
Even though the seller's going, I'm not going to do any repairs, and that's fine, but just saying as is just has a connotation to it.
All right, so, okay, so you don't put it in the MLS, but when you're going through everything, you can say, as you're negotiating, it is sold as is. That's where you
Right,
bring.
but again, it means nothing.
Okay.
Because I mean, when you say
Seems like
sold
that.
as is, what does as is mean? Does as is mean I don't need to disclose anything? No, I need to disclose everything.
Yeah, I know.
Does as is means I'm not doing any repairs? Okay, I don't have to do any repairs. So the term as is really, to me, it doesn't mean anything.
Okay.
And I know when sellers say, well, I'm selling it as is, they go, well, I'm not going to disclose, but you need to explain, no, even though you're selling as is, you still need to disclose everything you know.
I think I'm more, I know you have to disclose everything. I'm not trying to not do that. I think what it is like, you just don't want to do any, the seller doesn't want to do any repairs. Like I have an out-of-state seller right now, so he's not going to want to do anything.
Okay, but again, and I've done deals where, in the MLS says seller will not do any repairs. Okay.
Mhm.
That doesn't stop the buyer from submitting a request for repairs.
Right.
Okay. So I never want to say, well, no, buyer, you can't do a request for repairs because the seller said they're not doing any repairs.
Right.
I want to submit it and let the seller either ignore it or turn it down. And this way the buyer says, okay, we tried, they didn't do it. But if it never gets done, then it comes back to you. Hey, why didn't we submit a request for repairs?
Right. Okay.
So I know people use the word as is, but it really,
We should take that out.
I know. Hey, if I had my way, I'd take it out, but
Oh, God.
Okay, so days is important. How do we count days? I mean, I've had whole class on this.
You start at 0.
So let's say any contingency, let's say 17 days. So the first day is the day after you have an executed contract.
And that's 0.
Okay, so it means seller buys off, buyer buys off, any counter offers everything is executed. So you have a fully executed contract, that's day 0. And then you count 7, days. Every day counts.
Mhm.
Saturday, Sunday, holidays, every day counts. However, a contingency cannot end on a weekend or a holiday. So let's say day 17 turns out to be a Saturday.
Close on
So
Monday.
that means they have until Monday at 11:59 to perform whatever that contingency was. Now, if Monday was a holiday, they have until Tuesday at 11:59. So the weekends count when you count in, but the weekends don't count when it ends. Except now earnest money deposit, it's 3 business days. Okay, and those you can only count business days. So business days is any day that escrow and the banks are open. So like we had the holiday, Thursday was a holiday, Thanksgiving, Friday is actually a California holiday. I didn't know that, but it's actually a California state holiday. But again, escrow was closed. So those 2 days wouldn't have counted when you count in business days. So the first business day would have been Monday. So when you get your escrow instructions, when you open up escrow, when you open up a deal, and I think, with that and the TCs do that, is they'll send out saying, these are the dates, contingent, loan contingency date, so this way everyone agrees to these are the dates, we're all counting the same way. Because if people know up front when the date is, it's a lot better than going, oh, today's day 17. Oh my God, I didn't know that. Okay. So just make everyone aware of the dates, make sure everyone's counting on the same page, and then you'll have a very smooth transaction. Okay. So up to page 13. Okay. So here's liquidated damages. We all know what liquidated damages is. This is an all or nothing type of thing. So every buyer and every seller has to agree to this. If they don't, liquidated damages is not part of the contract. So the seller goes to you or the buyer goes to you, should I sign this? These are optional signatures. We cannot require anyone to sign it. We can only say, this is what it is, and advise them if they want to sign it or not. So liquidated damages basically says, in simple terms, if the buyer breaches the contract, the seller is entitled to either the earnest money deposit up to 3% of the purchase price. So let's say it's a $100,000 purchase price, 3% would be $3,000. Let's say they only put $1,000. So the seller is only going to be entitled to that $1,000. If they put in $4,000, the seller is only entitled to $3,000. So it's 3% or less, or earnest money deposit, whichever is less. So we can't advise them, yes, you should do it, yes, you should not do it, but that's what it is. If it is not agreed to, the seller can go after the buyer for any dollar amount as long as the seller can provide documentation of damages. So let's say, the seller says, well, you know what, I had my house off the market for this amount of time. I lost my deal over here. My damages is now $10,000. If this is not agreed to, they can go after the $10,000, but they have to prove their damages. With liquidated damages, they don't have to prove their damages. It's an automatic EMD or 3%, whichever is less. So that's the difference. Again, we can advise them to sign it, not sign it. We shouldn't highlight it. Everything should show it's an optional signature. One thing I do like that they did was arbitration of damages, they now put it in a box. So that makes it nice because people were confused. Am I signing here? Or if I sign here, does it include arbitration of damages? So arbitration just means that we're agreeing, again, it's all or nothing, and it's optional, that we are agreeing if we have a conflict and we can't resolve it, we're first going to go to mediation. And in mediation, the mediator does not make a decision. The mediator guides both sides to try to come to a solution. But the solution has to come from both parties. Arbitration is you go before an arbitrator, whether it be a judge, a lawyer, or whatever, and both sides present their case, then the arbitrator makes a decision. So mediation, we're coming to a conclusion together. Arbitration, someone's going to decide for us. And again, arbitration, mediation's the cheapest, arbitration second, and if we have to go to court, that's the most expensive. But again, optional signatures, everyone needs to agree. So if you have 2 buyers, 2 sellers, if 3 of the 4 people agree, 4th person doesn't agree, you don't have a deal. It's not included.
So,
Okay?
so
Yeah.
this whole, sorry, so this whole page, like when you're doing your DocuSign, you would not put, you would just leave this
Okay.
blank.
When you're using DocuSign or digital ink from zip forms, if you are doing this from a zip forms
Yes,
directly, they're intelligent enough to know these are optional signatures.
okay,
When you do it as a PDF and you put in a signature there, you should put it as an optional signature. You have that option. Some people don't know how to do that, so they put it as a required signature. So what's the difference is with an optional signature in DocuSign or digital ink, if they don't sign it, it doesn't stop the form from moving forward.
right,
If you miss a required signature, it won't let you finish the form.
right,
So sometimes we get this back and those things are not signed. So now the question becomes, did they truly not mean to sign it? Or did they truly just skipped over it by accident?
right,
So you as a buyer's agent, if you get something back that's not totally signed, I would make that call and say, hey, you know what? I noticed the signature is missing. Did you mean not to sign it or did you just overlook it?
okay,
Okay. If they say, oh no, I meant not to sign it, that's fine. Then it's not part of the contract. But
right,
if they just overlooked it, you could send it back and have them redo the signature.
okay,
But,
thank you.
you know, it's a gray area because you don't know what they meant. You know, since they could have skipped it just because they could have skipped it, or did they skip it because they really wanted to skip it?
Sorry, I just have one more quick question.
Sure.
Can they sign one part and not the other, or they have to sign both?
Nope.
Or
Arbitration and liquidated damage are 2 separate things.
2 separate things? Okay, that's what I thought.
So they could agree to liquidated damages and go, nope, I don't like arbitration. Or they
Got
can
it.
say, hey, I'm not doing liquidated damages, but yes, I want to go to arbitration.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is an added thing now. So let's say the buyer is an LLC or the buyer's a trust or something like that. We don't need a representative capacity anymore. We can do it right here. So if you check this box, this says, okay, now one or more buyers is a trust, corporation, or something. Okay, and the name of the entity, you know, John Smith LLC, and who can sign for it? You know, so that's what this represents now. So this is the RCSD in here. Now, let's say it's an LLC or a trust. As opposed in the grid, it says, you know, you have 3 days to prove that you can sign. So that proof is still needed. You know, escrow is going to need that proof if you're an LLC or you're a trust that you can sign this, but you don't need that representative capacity anymore. And then if you're the seller, you could do the same thing, you know, authorized signer, and you'd be fine. Okay, so now the question is, so we have a few options when we get the offer. We could just reject it and say, you know, thank you so much, you know, we got a better offer, or we could send them a counter offer, which is the same as we always used to do. We could also do what's called a backup offer addendum. So that says, I like your offer. We have a better offer that we're going with. So we're going to make you a backup offer and your backup offer number 1. So what happens is now this offer gets frozen. And let's say we take the other offer, it falls out of escrow. I'm obligated to now call this buyer and say, the first offer is out of escrow. Do you want to pursue your offer? And they go, yeah, let's go for it. Then at that point, you can either send a counter offer, or you can just accept the offer as is. So I'm going to tell you my preference is I would still do counter offers. And in the counter offer, you could say, if you accept all this counter offer, then you become a backup offer. So this way you've had that all out of the way. Because what happens if, you say, yeah, you're a backup offer, then offer number one falls out. Now you got to give this guy a counter. He says, no, forget it. So now you're back to square one. This way, you know everything up front. If offer number one falls out, offer number two is already with all the right services, all the right price, and we're good to go. And I'll show you how to do that. Okay, this is another new area, okay? Email. Whatever email you put there as the buyer agent or as a seller's agent, once I send anything to that email, it's considered delivered. I don't need a confirmation. I don't need anything. If I send it to the email you told me to send, it's considered delivered. So make sure whatever email you put there is correct. Make sure it doesn't go to spam. If you're going to do your TC's email, that's okay. But just remember, once I submit an email to that email, it's considered delivered. So if you want your TC to get it versus you, that works. But again, it's a responsibility. If it went to spam, went anyplace else, I'm not responsible. I sent it to you, it's delivered. So be very careful what you put there and make sure it's correct. And then buyer's investigation, same thing. You due diligence, make sure everything's correct and all that. California Privacy Act, you have a website, we take your information. You have the option to opt out of that. Okay, so that's the RPA. Any questions on that before we move to the next one? All right, FHA. The only thing I'm going to talk about this form is if you do have an FHA or VA, this is the most important part right there. You need to put what is the purchase price that you are going with, because that is what the appraisal is. Okay, so if you put 100,000 like I did, and it's really $1 million, if for some reason if the appraisal comes in at 900,000, you don't have to buy the property because you have to buy the property because it came in over 100,000. So make sure you put in there whatever's correct from the buyer side, and make sure as the listing agent, you have the correct dollar amount there, because that really is the issue with FHA. FHA and VA cannot remove appraisal contingency. It is against federal law for them to remove it. So even if they check that we're removing it, it's not removed. It's really whatever this dollar amount is here, that's what the appraisal needs to come in at or above. Contingency for sale of the buyer's home. So like I said,
Oh,
yes.
Sorry,
okay,
sorry, I had a question about the FHA.
yes.
So how would you get that number? Is that off comps? Because you're not going to get it
No,
appraised.
that
right?
number is whatever your purchase is, whatever the purchase price is that you're putting in the RPA. That's the number that should be there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I don't know why it doesn't autofill, but that number should be the same number.
Okay.
So, and if you change things, and this is where from the listing side, if you counter offer and now we have a higher purchase price, make sure there was a new FHA addendum with the new purchase price, because that purchase price is really what drives the appraisal. Okay, so nothing's really changed here. As you can see, it hasn't been updated since 12/20 last year. But now 2 years ago, I forgot when, 2022. But the key I want to bring up here is leave A as a default. So A basically says, I need to get into escrow and I need to close escrow. If you say B, B just says, hey, I just need to get into escrow. I don't care about closing. And if you do C, it says, hey, I'm in escrow already. I just need to close it. The problem is, if you fall out of escrow and you need to find another property, what happens now? So if you just leave A, you're covered for all conditions. The other thing to look at here is when does the seller have the right to give me to remove my contingencies? The default is right away. B is 17 days. C is never. C used to be buried in the RPA, and you know, I tell my agents always to check C and see if they ever get caught. But basically what it is if I'm accepting your offer and you have 17 days to get into escrow, now I have another offer that comes along that's similar or better. When can I tell you to remove your contingency or I'm taking this other offer? If I don't check anything, I could do it right away. So day 3 comes along, I get a better offer. I could say, you know what? I just got a better offer. Please remove your contingency. And if you say you can't, then I can cancel and move on. B2 is saying 17 days. So for the first 17 days, I cannot ask you to remove your contingency. But on the 18th day, I can. So hopefully you're in escrow by that time, you're moving forward. So even if they get, you know, a slightly better offer, they're still going to go with you because you already put the effort in and you're moving forward. Or number 3 is saying you never have the right to do that. So even if you get fantastic backup offers, you're not going to be able to cancel on me. Most likely the seller will counter that to number 2 or number 1 if he, you know, really wants to play hardball. So that's, I mean, number 2 is sort of an in-between. 17 days gives me time to get an escrow, gives me time to move forward. If you don't check anything, it's immediate. And if you check number 3 and the seller doesn't counter, you're golden for the whole transaction. Okay, so the next question becomes, when do the timelines start? So when did the timeline start on my transaction? So if we just leave it here, time periods in agreement for inspections, contingencies, and close of escrow, those are the addendum, shall begin as specified in agreement. So that means I'm still trying to get my house into escrow, but this house that I just have an accepted offer on, my timeline start. So I've got to do my inspections, I got to do my appraisal, I got to do everything I need to do to meet my timelines. So I may be already done before I even get an offer on my property. Do I want to spend all that money and all that time where I potentially may not be able to sell my property? So you may say, no, you know what? I'd like it to start the day after I give you notice that I'm now in escrow. So this way, both properties, your property and the selling property, both are sort of on the same track with timelines. Now, on the other side, the buyer's deposit, when is that due? Again, I could do it right away, or I could do it 3 days after I tell you I'm in escrow. If I'm asking for the timeline to start later, I may be as a, good faith, show good faith, put my money in escrow right away. So this way, I have skin in the game. The seller knows I have skin in the game, and I'm ready to go. If I check this box and say 3 days, I, as a seller, are probably going to counter you and say, no, you know what? I want skin in the game now, because that means for 17 days, I have nothing. You can back out after 17 days, and I've just wasted, 17 days where I could have been selling my property. Okay? Those are the 3 things on this form to look at. Any questions on that? And please, please, please protect your buyer's interest. And if they need to sell their home, fill out this form. So here's a new form that we talked about. tenant occupied property addendum. So this is if there is a tenant in the property. This is, we need to fill this out to say what's going to happen. So the default is tenant to remain in possession. So if I don't do anything, if I don't fill out this form, the tenant is staying. The buyer is now a landlord. Okay. So unless the buyer is buying this as an investment property, this is not what we want to happen. So what we want is property be delivered vacant and whatever it is, and 5 days prior to the close of escrow. Okay. So that's saying within five days prior to the close of escrow, this property should be vacant. Funny coincidence, the 5 days is also when we're going to be doing our VP. So when we're doing our VP, if the tenant's still there, we have an issue. Had a deal. The seller had a seller in possession of like 15 days. Tenant was supposed to be out, and the tenant was just renting a room. A tenant is defined, let me see if it's here. Yeah, a tenant is defined as, here it is. A tenant shall be any adult person other than seller who is occupying the property, whether paying rent or not. So I'm renting out a room. That person is a tenant. If I don't address that, and that person is still there when I close escrow, that person is now my tenant, and my buyer has to deal with it. Okay, whether they're paying rent or not, that person becomes a tenant. So this is the very important distinction that you need to understand. If you're looking at the property and you see there's other people in this home, whether they're paying rent or not, they are tenants and they need to be addressed.
So
Yes.
Fred, so I'm representing a seller
Yes,
and the son is in the home, and we wrote it the way close of escrow plus 2 days for him to leave.
okay, so for the seller to leave.
For this, yeah, the seller's son. The seller lives in Vegas. It's a trust, but the
Okay.
son is in the home, but we wrote it as close of escrow plus 2.
Okay, so you're gonna,
Is that? We're not in escrow. We don't have a buyer, but I'm just saying that's how we wrote it. You
yeah,
know,
the
so
only
it's-
problem is because the seller in possession covers the seller, not the tenant.
Mm,
Okay, so what you, yeah, make sure you have a seller in possession at least done
okay.
correctly. And, you know, the buyer or you should definitely do a TOPA.
Okay, because I mean, I don't have a buyer yet. I mean, it could be we could, negotiate something different, but I mean, that's how I was
Right,
told
but-
to write it.
Right, but that person is a tenant in the property.
Yeah, now I understand that, because even whether he's paying rent or not, he's still a
Correct.
tenant.
Right.
Right.
And this, comes in, like, when I had my home before I sold it, I had people, renting rooms or, doing a good favor, and people were just staying in my room. Those people become tenants.
Hmm.
So it doesn't make a difference if they're paying rent, doesn't make a difference if they have a lease. They're a tenant,
Okay.
and
all
they need to be addressed correctly.
right, okay.
If you don't address it, it could cause issues.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
and then if the tenant is going to stay, this just goes on, what's happening. We need to do an estoppel, so this way everything transfers over to the new buyer who's now the new landlord, so this works for both ways. This works if there's a tenant and the tenant's moving, or if there's a tenant and the new buyer is an investor and he's going to take on the new tenant with the lease or whatever's going on. This just takes care of everything there. Okay. But it's very important if there's a tenant there, because like I was telling, so we had a one where the seller had, 3 days or 4 days seller in possession. We filled out the seller in possession, but the tenant was supposed to be out 5 days prior to close of escrow. Buyer does their verification, no sign anyone's moving. you know, the tenant goes, oh, you know, I was just gonna stay until, you know, the seller moved. I figured I had a few extra days. Don't know if it turns out okay or not, but that person's day to day after the sale of possession's over, that person now becomes a tenant and the new buyer has a headache. So it's better to say, nope, you know what? You had 5 days. This needs to be done now. The only person who can stay after this is the seller in possession, not you. So we need to move forward with, you know, you move it out before I can close escrow. And in today's market, tenants are a big issue. Trying to get rid of them, trying to evict them, trying to deal with them. They need to talk to an attorney who specializes in tenant law. Otherwise, there's lots of issues that can happen. Okay, contingency removal. Okay, this is what we talked about. Basically, it's changed a little bit, and it's changed where it really defines more, you know, loan, appraisal, those are the issue ones. But now for investigation of property, we have a lot of choices. We can check 1, removes it all, or we could check 2, only the part of the investigation related to inspections concerning physical attributes of the property. Okay, so this, and we could go back to 12B1 to see, is insurance part of the physical attribute or not? Not sure. You know, I don't want to take a chance. We could say all buyers investigations other than physical attributes, or we could say entire buyers investigations except home, insurance, contingency. Okay, so if your buyer does everything they're supposed to do, they talk to their insurance agent, they find out it's insurable, and they find out an actual binding quote that the lender's okay with and everyone's okay with, you can remove it. But if you haven't got that piece, do not remove your investigation. Okay, keep that insurance investigation alive, because that might bite you at the end when they can't afford it or they can't get it or anything else happens. Okay, the rest of it is all simple. I mean, you know, what are you removing? Again, check to make sure what you are removing. You know, they're very specific now. Review of seller documents. I'm reviewing all seller documents, you know, or I'm reviewing all seller documents except, you know, I didn't get my disclosures. I didn't get my government reports that I've asked for, or something else that I didn't get. You know, so just be very specific, HOA, leased and lien. You know, if you check all buyer contingencies, remember, what does that include? That includes everything. That includes your insurability. That includes your HOA docs. That includes your leases, your liens. You're removing everything. So be very careful what you remove and when you remove them. Statewide buyer. Like I tell my kids, and like I tell all my agents, whenever you see a disclosure, it is because something happened. Someone got sued. I mean, McDonald's did not put coffee may be hot out of the goodness of their heart. They got sued. So now they put warning, coffee may be hot. You know, if you have a hair dryer and it says do not use in the shower, you know, believe it or not, someone probably used it in the bath or shower and got electrocuted. So that is why there was this disclosure. So anytime you see disclosures, because something happened. Disclosures are reactive, not proactive. It's, we did a disclosure after we find issues. So this is 14 pages of disclosures. You know, every single disclosure out there, mold, inspection, pets, animals, septics, you know, whatever it is. And then we only need to sign it at the last page. It used to be every page had to have an initial. Now it's just the last page. But again, if your buyers, you know, are bored and they need some good reading, it's good to go, you know, read this. It'll help you sleep at night. But otherwise, just highlight, you know, the interested ones. Fire hardened, defensible space. Another one that's come up a lot these days is square footage, lot size, boundaries, surveys. You know, Realist or the tax roll has 1 square footage. the owner says, oh, no, I'm 3,000 feet, even though this says 2,100, where is it? We're not experts. We don't measure anything. We don't do anything. We do have a form that they need to fill out saying, the tax roll says square footage is this. An appraiser says square footage this. Seller says square footage is this. We're just letting everyone know these are the different square footages. It is for you to decide what is the correct answer. Okay, so we're not representing anything. We're just saying this is where the information is coming from. Okay. This is an in-house form that I think we probably need to update. Like I talked about, these are home inspecting companies we've done business with that we are referring. These are home warranty companies. These are, termite inspection companies. So this way we could say, these are the companies we've done business with. If you need to do a home inspection, please select one of these, as opposed to, I know every realtor has their preferred inspector, and I know every realtor has their list of inspectors they hope don't do inspections on their home. But this is just a list to protect us, to say, we're just giving you a list. You guys decide what you want to use.
Fred, there's a question in the chat.
Yes, I can't see my chat since I only have one computer now.
Oh, Marshall Mashburn, what form discloses different square footages?
It's actually called the square footage addendum, and I could, let me pull that up right now. I'll show you. It's not one that we talk about much. Square footage and lot size. And basically it goes through, difference in square footage, and it basically says, this is what the public record says. This is what the MLS says. This is what the seller says. This is what an appraiser says. This is what a floor plan says. It is just saying, these are the different numbers. I'm not representing any of them. This is where the information came from. And it's really only used when there is a discrepancy. I mean, if realtor says, 1,200 square feet and the appraiser measures 1,200 square feet, we don't have an issue. So it's only really used when there are issues. And this, again, came about between a lawsuit that was done by Coldwell Banker, where they were a dual agency. And, it was a house, I think in Malibu or in West Side, someplace like that, where there was a big discrepancy in terms of square footage for a property, and they lost. So this is just, disclosing where this information came from. As a standard thing, we should always say in the MLS, buyer to verify square footage and room count. Because again, room count's another issue. Realists can say 4 bedrooms, when the floor plans were offered to the taxes, it was 4-bedroom design. The seller said, no, I like to have 3 bedrooms and one is an den, and they got converted. Or the other ones we have where it's 3 bedrooms on real list, but it's actually 4 bedrooms because the builder had the option of an additional bedroom. So when they do that, unfortunately, the tax rolls and all that never get updated. So the MLS shows it as 3, but technically there's really 4 bedrooms in the house. So just to be safe, buyer to investigate square footage and room count. We do not represent anything as accurate or true. We don't know if it's been permitted, not permitted, how it works, so we're just, again, the goal, and I know this is, a CYA thing for the agents, but we never represent anything. Okay. We are giving you information and we are telling you where it came from. Okay. So when we say 1,200 square feet per county assessor, or 1,300 feet per, seller, it's not, we're not saying it. Everything we say should have a connotation where it came from, because we don't want to be the representative of this information. buyer's investigation waiver. So this is saying, I'm not doing any investigations. I'm buying this house, I'm gonna tear it down, I don't need to do anything. And that's fine, that is the buyer's right, that is against broker advice. But all we need to do is say that they are waiving their inspection to the home and they're waiving their inspection for pest. Now, the other thing, which not a lot of people do here, is when you have a home inspection, the inspector is always going to say, you know, roof looks fine, but should be, you know, you should have a roof inspection. You know, HVAC looks fine, but you should have a HVAC inspection. So technically, we should be putting all this stuff here and saying, you know, these were other reports we recommended, but we're not doing them. We don't use it for that. We haven't been caught or any issues for that. But the big one is waiving the inspection, not the contingency, but this is actually, I'm not doing an inspection. Now, let's say you have a house that fell out of escrow. They had an inspection. They now give your buyer this inspection, which is one of the requirements. And your buyer goes, you know what? I have this inspection. I'm not going to spend the money for my own inspection. So you need to say they are waiving their inspection. Because even if they got an inspection from another source, which is the seller, if they have an issue with that inspection, they have no recourse because that inspection wasn't for them. So I always recommend my buyers to do their own inspection, use this as information, and you know, your inspector go, oh, you know, let me look at this more closely. They found something there, but never rely that as your only source of inspection. If they are, then again, we need to have it waived. Okay? And that needs to be in dot loop.
So Fred, I got a quick
Yes.
question about that.
Sure.
So let's say a home went back on the market and the seller is saying, I already had the home inspection, it was last week.
Yep.
Saying that the home warranty could deny the home warranty for that newest buyer because the home inspection was not paid for by them.
Yes, correct.
Wow.
Yep. And not so much the home warranty, but I'm just saying, let's say they move in and now the AC doesn't work. They have no recourse to go after the inspector and said, hey, you told me the AC was working, now it doesn't work, because the contract was between the home inspector and the previous buyer. Now, if I paid for my home inspection and the AC doesn't work when I move in, I can go back to the inspector and say, wait a minute, you told me it was working. Now it's not working. What happened? So again, it's just, yes, you're getting the information, but again, every inspector is a little bit different. Every inspector does different types of inspections. You can take that as information, but I would not be relying as the sole inspection of the property. Now the buyer says, hey, I don't want to pay for the inspection. That's their decision, but they need to waive the inspection. So this way they can come back and say, well, wait a minute, you didn't tell me I could do my own inspection. Because buyers and sellers have very short-term memory. You know, they won't remember conversations you told them. You know, you can document it and all that, but that's the safest way is to have it in the explanation. Notice the seller to perform. So again, we talked about timelines and we talked about, you know, what do we need to do? So if you as a buyer are not getting your disclosures in time, your clock is still ticking. You're going to need to ask for an extension. But I would put the pressure back on the seller saying, hey, wait a minute, you haven't given me all my disclosures yet. You know, you haven't given me the TDS or the NHD. Be very specific what you're talking about. Hey, I haven't got my condo disclosures. You know, I haven't got my delivery of title report. I have, you know, didn't get my disclosure of that you were able to act as a representative, that you can sell this. So all these disclosures have 7 days to be delivered from the seller to the buyer. If you don't have it, clocks are still ticking. Don't come to me at day 16 and say I didn't get my disclosures, because you should have been letting the other side know right away. And if it's day 7 or day 8, I would be doing a notice to perform. And everyone goes, oh my God, I don't want to do a notice to perform. It's going to screw up the deal. They're going to get upset with me. No, it's just showing that you're doing your deal. You're protecting your seller. You're protecting your buyer. We're just following the contract. Doesn't mean we're going to cancel. It's just saying, hey, you know, we need these things to do our due diligence. So please complete them. And as promised, we are done. 11:26. You see, even with all glitches. Any questions on anything we talked about? Oh my God, I must have done a great job. Or are you just so bored you don't want to hear anymore? One of the two. If buyer's inspected choice would have been the same as the previous inspection, yes. I suggest that they do an updated inspection. They may not have to pay as much, but if they want to use the same inspector, this way they have a contract between them and the inspector. So yes, I would do that. Tomorrow's class is going to start at 10 o'clock. I have another meeting I have to do at 9 o'clock, but at 10 o'clock sharp, we'll start and we'll go over everything. So last chance, any questions? All right. Yes.
Yeah. What forms are we going to go over tomorrow? Because I like
Tomorrow, it's the listing side.
the listing side. Okay.
Yes.
'Cause I'll just print out stuff so I have it to like highlight.
Tomorrow's the listing side and any auxiliary documents. And then Wednesday, it's all the other documents that we'll talk about.
Okay. Thank
So-
you.
Okay?
Thank you.
I
very
have
much.
we
I have
wait.
a question.
Yes, what's your
On
question?
the purchase contract on, what was it, the page where you have to fill out, or you have an option to put the initial deposit amount?
Yes, okay, so that's at the beginning of the purchase contract.
Okay, so when I put a initial deposit of 10,000, it
Okay.
doesn't give me an automatic percentage.
Okay, did you put a purchase price?
Yes.
So you have a purchase
Oh,
price.
maybe I didn't. Yes, 800,000.
So you have a purchase price of 800,000 and you put an initial deposit of 10,000 and it didn't give you a,
It doesn't give me a percentage, an automatic percentage. It's not yellowed out.
okay, when you say not yellowed out,
An automatic fill-in. Let me see.
so you
I don't
put
know, it
in,
might be something with my win forms, or I don't know, because it doesn't do the automatic fill-in.
okay, so you put purchase price 800,000,
Uh-huh.
okay, or 8 million, whatever.
Mhm.
And you put a dollar amount here. And you didn't get this 1%?
Okay, now it did it.
Okay,
Okay, I don't know why it didn't do it. It wasn't doing it. I redid the 800,000 and now it filled it in.
okay.
Okay,
It may have been a glitch, didn't catch something.
yeah.
You don't
it-
put in any commas, is that correct, Fred? That
No
could-
commas, just
No.
straight dollars, straight numbers.
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
that was my only hiccup right there. I was like, mine's not doing it, but yeah.
No
After
problem.
I put it, I took the 800,000 and I put it back again and did it. I don't
Yep.
know. Anyways,
Um,
okay,
Also,
thank you.
just so you know, if you ever have any questions on this, talk to your manager first. If not, talk to me. If you have questions with zip forms, contracts, dot loop, we'll get you to the right person.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you, Fred. Have a good day.
Okay, see you guys tomorrow.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.